Constructivism and Surrealism by Kieran Nevin and Maisie Petruski. Hello, this is Kira, joined by Patty, and today we will be talking about Surrealism. So, what is Surrealism? Surrealism is an art and culture movement that began after World War I and World War II in response to the violence that had occurred. Surrealism focuses on the unconscious state of mind portrayed through art, which often results in dreamlike, fantastical art pieces that question reality. So basically, what surrealism is the reflection of an artist's inner state of mind. It questions reality and it has very strong motifs and ties to the artist's state of mind and their own personal life. So surrealism is very much in opposition to constructivism. Constructivism is just very brutalist. It is very, black and white, while surrealism is very fantastical. It is the most an art piece can be. In many art pieces, surrealism is a reflection of the artist's own personal state of mind and their own personal tragedies and lives. So many times you get just these very personal works of art, like in Frida Kahlo's, where she was very much tied to how personal she can make her art. And so you see themes of medical, and Patty was telling me right before that, his favorite artist is Frida because of just how personal a lot of her art pieces are and how just, in touch, surrealists had to be. And many surrealists found their own inspirations in dreams. So it is very left to the imagination. It is left to the reader's own perspective. And it is very dependent on, the artist and who is even viewing the art, because we can view surrealist art in many different ways. It is fluid, it is expressive, and it is the most art can be. So yeah, that is what surrealism is. Thank you so much for watching.
So the first piece is titled The Results of the First 5-Year Plan. It was created in 1932 by Varvara Stefanova and is kept in Moscow. It's a photo montage as seen on the right. So it's a constructivist artwork. It features 3 main colors: red, which denotes the Soviet flag, and black and white photographs. And the layering and mismatched scale of the photographs and all the elements in the piece, which I'm going to get into, creates a lot of dynamism. So after the USSR was established, it was primarily led by Vladimir Lenin, who was leading the Bolsheviks, and he established the 5-year plan, which was both economic and political and had a lot of power over all the industries in Russia. And it was very communist and argued, well, it didn't argue, it set up a plan that wanted wanted to industrialize everything and collectivize everything. And primarily that included farming. So they didn't want individual farms, they wanted collective farms. And that was one of the main um, reasons that there was a downfall in the plan, because individual farming had been allowing much more distribution of food, and so without that there was a famine, and the plan failed miserably. But this piece was part of a propagandist publication that Stalin had started. So when Stefanova was hired, she wasn't hired to portray the actual results. She was hired to portray the results that Stalin wanted. So it is propaganda, and it uses a lot of tools to appear like the plan was a big success. So if we take a look, the red here is very bold and commanding, and this figure here is Stalin sort of presiding over all the citizens. If you look at the figures down here, they have really exaggerated expressions to sort of commandeer power and grandeur that the Soviet Union wanted the rest of the world to believe it had achieved. And another small detail, these letters here, CCCP, are the Russian letters for USSR. Over time, propaganda had just become a necessity to hide the disaster of the plan, because it was such a disaster because of the poverty that it created. Yeah. So this next piece is titled Object. It is a fur-covered cup, saucer, and spoon, as seen on the right, and it was created in 1936 by Merritt Oppenheim, and it's kept in the MoMA, and the fur is gazelle fur. Object is a surrealist artwork. There's not much to cover in terms of form, besides the fact that it was covered in gazelle fur, and these are the dimensions. So it is said that Oppenheim was in a Paris cafe in 1936 with Picasso and Dora Maar, and Oppenheim was dining, and she reached over and her sleeve rolled up and revealed a fur bracelet, and Oppenheim joked that she wished her cup could be covered in fur because of how cold it was to drink out of. And then Picasso remarked, almost anything can be covered in fur. And Oppenheim laughed it off and later went home, but it is also said that on the way home, Oppenheim stopped at a store and picked up the exact cup, saucer, and spoon which she used for this piece. It's really the perfect inspiration for a surrealist piece because it takes something very familiar that most people use in their everyday lives and transforms it completely into something that it is not, something that's uncomfortable, strange, and makes you question everything around you. And it's Oppenheim's most famous piece and was interpreted in so many different ways because people were alarmed that such a dainty object could be turned into something animalistic. Often people questioned if it had sexual connotations, but these were always denied by Oppenheim, always saying that it was just meant to be discomforting, not sexual. Oppenheim wanted people to immediately assume what it would be like to drink out of the cup or to use the spoon, because that sensation, like, immediately, makes you imagine and creates a really sensory experience. And that's exactly what Oppenheim wanted, and what surrealists wanted, to sort of evoke memories and raise questions through the work.
So this speaks to kind of like a very surrealist art piece. And it sort of discusses how Frida felt at this time and how she kind of existed in a world that really just did not appreciate her, especially as a female artist. This piece is such a good example of surrealist art because none of these things would happen to an actual human being. An actual human being wouldn't be able to share arteries with another person. Another human being would not be able to do the things that she is doing in this painting, but that's not the point. The point of this piece is that she was able to translate how she was feeling in a way that could not be described with words, could not be described with a traditional art piece. And that's why surrealism lends itself so well, specifically in this piece, because she has so much inner turmoil, so much inner anger and just despair that she is just like representing it through surrealism. And at this time, surrealism was a very new concept that in general people just didn't really use that much. So she is one of the first surrealist artists. Surrealism was not defined at this point in history. And she was one of the first pioneers, especially being a woman, first woman pioneer of surrealist art at this time. And I personally just believe that it is one of my favorite pieces. It is just so beautiful, and just considering that she was disabled for such a large part of her life, and she, at the very end of her life, was not able to paint anymore, sort of just discusses how surrealism speaks beyond words, it speaks beyond physicality. And it is just a beautiful way to translate art, in my opinion. All right, Patty, say goodbye. Say goodbye. Say goodbye. Ah, bye. Look at the camera. Bye. Oh, goodbye. This is Kira and Patty again. Patty, say hi. And we will be talking about The Jungle. So this piece is surrealist and cubist with Caribbean and Afro-Cuban influences throughout. It serves as a socio-economic representation of what Cuba was going through at this time and how that spoke to many of the issues that the artist himself was going through. It sort of juxtaposes the idea of Cuba being this like vast oasis. He left. Sort of this vast oasis of like, you know, beautiful lands and like beautiful people, which I'm not saying is not true, but it sort of ignored many issues that Cuba was experiencing at this time. There were many laborers, which was shown in this art piece, and many of them were struggling to make ends meet. And when Lamb visited Paris, he was inspired by the Surrealists at the time and wanted to bring this back to his homeland of Cuba. When he resettled in Cuba in 1941, he began to integrate symbols from Santeria, which is when the supernatural merges with the natural world through mass animals, and is later possessed by a god. So in general, this piece kind of mixes surrealist concepts and the realities that Cuba was going through at this time. There's a lack of a clear horizon line, and that sense contributes to the disorienting situation that Cuba was in at this time. He's weird. What is also shown in this piece is sugarcane, a significant Cuban agricultural product tied to labor exploitation. And the thing is, sugar canes aren't grown in the jungle. They're grown next to rivers and just not in, you wouldn't find sugar cane in the jungle. And this itself challenges the idealized image of Cuba. Cuba was not doing well. Cuba was exploiting its laborers. Cuba was failing due to foreign countries such as the US taking advantage of them. And the disproportion amongst these shapes embraces surrealist concepts. The jungle captures a critical moment in Cuba's history after World War II and its very complex relationship with the US. And like Frida's Los Dos Fridas, it discusses turmoil. It discusses inner identity that is shown through surrealism. And many of these pieces that this artist later created still translates to this effect. It still shows how Cuba was not perfect. Cuba was not thriving, even though, the US really sought to make it out that way. Hi, buddy, you back? And just in general, surrealism art and surrealist art pieces, like The Jungle, shows an inner conflict, and it shows a resiliency to make Cuba better, to advocate for laborers who were not being well treated. And in general, this artist just speaks to his own home country and how the exploitation of laborers personally affected him. So yeah, thank you. Patty, say bye. All right, thank you so much for watching.